Hey there, tone chasers. Digital modeling for guitarists has come such a long way since the red kidney bean pod days. However, so many of the myths that were created during those days persist today when we've got modeling that ranges from top of the line stuff like the Axe FX3, the Kemper and the Helix, all the way down to the Mua micro preamp pedals. So we're essentially covering the entire price range of guitar gear from like sub $100 to over $2,000 pieces of gear. Yet these myths still exist in the guitar community about digital modeling. Let's break some of them down. One myth is that digital modeling is expensive when you compare it to, say, a combo amp with a couple of pedals. Well, let's think about a potential modeling rig that we could put together. In this case, I'll use the example of a Fractal AX8, which is one of the top tier modelers, which you could buy along with an Atomic CLR wedge for a little bit over $2,000 US, and you would have a rig that can literally cover every style from heavy metal through to funk. It's lightweight, you can carry the CLR in one hand, a guitar bag on your back, and the AX8 in a case in the other and walk straight into a gig. I use a rig like this all the time when I play live. I don't use a CLR, I just use the AX8 and my guitar because I'm super lazy. But if you're very, very intent on being able to monitor yourself with your own monitoring rig, something like a CLR is a great way to go. So something like that would run you a little over $2,000 US. Now let's consider an alternative rig, like for example, a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe, which I've used for a bunch of gigs in the past. Great sounding amps, they have a really great clean sound, and they are perfect pedal platform. They have a pretty nifty distorted sound as well. So let's say you took something like a Hot Rod Deluxe as your rig. So that is your amplifier and your preamp as well as your speaker. So in the case of the AX8 and the CLR, the AX8 would be your preamp and all your effects, and the CLR would simply be amplifying stuff. So if you've got the Hot Rod Deluxe sorted, what you would need to do to that is probably to add some pedals to get some other sounds. So if we wanted the same sort of functionality that we have with an AX8 or a Helix, we would probably want to go for something like the Strymon Big Sky, the Timeline, and the Mobius, or as people call it, the Strifecta on the internet, right? Now, they list for about $470 US each. So by the time you've bought those three pedals just to do modulation, delay, and reverb, you're already spending more money than you would on the AX8 alone. In fact, you're probably spending, what, about 1,400 American dollars at about $800, depending on where you get it from for a Hot Rod Deluxe, and you're running around the same price. Keep in mind, you don't have any overdrive pedals, you don't have any filter sounds or wah sounds or anything like that, and you're kind of stuck with having to cable all of this up and stick it on a pedal board, which is going to cost you more money as well. So in that case, going the modeling route is not only easier in terms of the amount of gear that you have to carry to a gig, it's cheaper as well. So I think that kind of busts the myth that modeling is necessarily more expensive. Even then, you can do something like my buddy Ryan, who does Plagueside Studios. Go and check out his YouTube channel, it's really great. He made a mini modeling pedal board using some of the Mua micro preamp pedals. And I think the whole thing probably ran to around $500 or $600, and it sounds phenomenal. You can go straight to front of house with that. It's a total gig ready thing. Or you could add a small, pedal board power amp and run it into a cabinet, and you've got a great sounding rig, probably for under $1,000. So digital modeling is expensive. Myth busted. Modeling amps are only for metal players. Well, if you visited the Line 6 website or the Fractal website or the Kemper website, I don't know if that really stacks up, because look at people like Carrie Underwood's guitar player, or Justin York from Paramore, or The Edge from U2, who's they're all using Fractal products in that case. Guys like Pliny used Helix Native, which is a plug-in to record his latest album. So you've got this whole swathe of artists from country to pop rock to, the new Paramore album almost sounds like new wave, to essentially what I would call like fusion. Pliny's not really a metal guy to me. And they're all using modeling products. Of course, loads of metal bands are using modeling products because they sound amazing. And when you're using 8 and 9 string guitars, modelers can do stuff that real amps can't. So it makes a lot of sense to use them in that setting. But they're also being used in so many rigs for both huge name touring artists, again, Taylor Swift, Def Leppard, they're all using modeling products live, all the way down to people who are playing, small club gigs every night and mid-sized venues. If you want to hear the Fractal AX8, I'm a big fan of the AX8 because I use one all the time. Go and check out my buddy Luke Gallagher's channel. He's an amazing country guitar player, and he uses the AX8 all the time. And he pulls some pretty phenomenal tones with that thing. Another criticism of digital modeling is that it just makes everything sound the same. Now, again, this might have to do with the same kind of preconceptions people have when they say, oh, only metal guys use modelers. What I think people are confusing there is the limitations of a particular genre. For example, you could make the point that a lot of modern metal is very derivative, much in the same way that a lot of modern pop music is very derivative, in the way that people naturally follow trends and use pieces of gear that are more popular than the other. You know, it's kind of the flavor of the month thing. So you definitely have those limitations built into styles of music, but again, that's the musicians and their creative choices, not the gear. So if you're a creative player, you can make this stuff work any way you want. Furthermore, with a lot of modelers, different guitars sound like different guitars, and that's a really important thing. That's what tube amps do, right? So have a listen to this clip. I'm going to use my Strat, a Tele, and my PRS, the same patch on my Axe FX3, haven't changed anything. I'm just going to play a few things, and for me anyway, these definitely sound like I'm playing different guitars. I would say the most common comment that I get on any of my videos where I'm demonstrating digital modeling gear is somebody weighing in and saying, hey, I just wouldn't use all this stuff. I would spend more time editing and playing around with all the different options and tweaking than I would playing the guitar. Well, this isn't a problem to do with modelers. For example, I've been using the Axe FX3 a lot recently, and I just did a video where I used 4 blocks to get all the sounds that I need for a gig. And basically, if you don't want to tweak, it's as easy as this. Just put your gear beyond arm's length and then play guitar. And you can also watch my video about option paralysis and the way that I deal with it, which is just to use the first thing that works. So many amp simulations and effects sound absolutely amazing straight out of the box, whether you're using Kemper profiles by someone like Michael Britt, or big hairy guitars, or you're using the stock AX8 amps or the XFX3 amps, or you're using stuff like the Helix amps. I remember when I tried out a Helix, I think it was one of the Tweed models, and I didn't do anything. I just plugged a Strat straight into it, and it was like my perfect Fender sound. So yeah, the idea that option paralysis has to be a thing has nothing to do with the gear and everything to do with your mindset. Another argument that people love to trot out is that, hey, you know, when Joe Bonamassa uses a modeler, I'll go and use one. Or when Robin Ford uses a modeler, I'll go and use one. Which is fair enough, I guess. You know, if you're going to tie your sense of identity as a guitar player so tightly to one of these like icons of music, that's fine. But, you know, that's how you get derivative styles. I was talking about that before, where it's like in, you know, modern metal or modern pop. Everybody's using what everybody else is using, so it's derivative, but that's why I don't want to use a modeler, because it's derivative. But when Joe Bonamassa uses one or Robin Ford uses one, then I'll do it because I really want to sound like those guys. So that's not an argument against modeling. That's just confirmation bias. You know, you're using a particular piece of gear, somebody that you respect and maybe idolize uses a piece of gear, so you feel like you have something in common and you can sort of attach your identity to that. But in reality, what Joe Bonamassa uses has nothing to do with your playing. It has nothing to do with my playing. Go out and create your own sound. And, you know, ultimately, whether you use that with a tube amp, you can create your own sound on a tube amp, or whether you want to use a digital modeler, create your own sound on a digital modeler. The point should be that you're trying to create your own sound. I saw a great video recently with Sinister Gates from Avenged Sevenfold, and he talks about using the Axe FX3 and how, you know, it lets him do things that he never would have imagined, and he's using it as a creative tool rather than just a piece of gear to copy another piece of gear. So, you know, don't worry about whether modelers can copy a piece of gear perfectly or whether you can copy somebody's style. We should be worrying about going out and actually being creative and being ourselves. And, you know, that has nothing to do with digital modeling, and it shouldn't be an argument that's used against digital modelers. And of course, my favorite point, digital rigs will never sound as good as tubes. Now, we've got to break that down a little bit and try to actually find out what people mean when they say it will never sound as good as tubes and what that means. So the first thing that could mean is that when somebody plugs in a modeler to a full range speaker, what they are hearing is an emulation of an amplifier and a cabinet and a microphone and a preamp and a bunch of post-processing, the way you would listen to a recorded guitar tone. However, if you walk into Guitar Center and you just plug into a Marshall and stand in front of it, you're hearing the sound of a cabinet in a room, what we would call amp in the room tones. So a lot of the time, people get confused and they're not comparing apples to apples. It's an amplifier in the room as opposed to the sound of a microphone capturing an amplifier cabinet in a room, which are very different things. And I would definitely recommend that if you can't understand the difference there, go and read a little bit about close miking and do some listening. There's so many videos on YouTube that you can check out where people can move a microphone an inch and it can drastically change the tone, the overall tone of the guitar sound, and go from zero to hero essentially. So that's one reason that people might have the impression that digital rigs don't sound as good as or don't sound like tube amps. The second point that I think this refers to is that a lot of people play modelers and go, oh wow, the clean sounds are really great and the high gain sounds are really great, but can it do edge of breakup tones? Well, I'm not here to try to convince you either way. Just listen to this clip. This is my Strat plugged straight into the Axe FX3 and I'm using a JTM 45 model. Listen to how that by changing the way I pick, how I pick, whether I'm using my thumb or my pick, and the intensity of my picking, how I can get this massive dynamic range out of the amplifier. And that is one thing that guitar players seem to love about tube amps. It's those edge of breakup tones where you can get the amp into this sort of sweet spot where it really interacts with your playing style and it acts like an extension of the instrument. That's really important because as guitar players, we're expressive instrumentalists, you know. We want this idea of being able to have an idea in our head and not even have to think about it, have it come out of our fingers, hit the strings, come through our amplifier, and sort of have this synergy happening where essentially, I mean, this should be the goal, right? We're just trying to make music. We're not worrying about the tone. We're not worrying about the gear that we're using. And in that case, those kind of qualities of a tube amplifier are very desirable. But we've crossed that threshold with modeling gear. Edge of breakup tones, modelers absolutely crush them. So I could keep going on and on about this, but hopefully I've at least cleared up some of the misinformation around digital modeling. At the end of the day, whether you want to use tubes, whether you want to use a solid state amp like, you know, a lab series like Ty Tabor and BB King did, some of my favorite players use solid state gear actually, or whether you want to use digital modeling, at the end of the day, the goal should be to try and define your own sound and express yourself creatively and, you know, worry less about guitar tone and worry more about actually making music and having fun with all of it and not comparing dick sizes just because somebody's got like a full stack that he paid 10 grand for and someone's got a micro preamp. You know, it's not relevant. Just go and make some music. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and feeling really generous, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you guys around. Peace.